Welcome to part 6, grant writing for schools, completing a budget. And our disclaimer, funding for this project was provided through a grant from Delta Dental of Arkansas in collaboration with the School-Based Health Alliance of Arkansas and Healthy Active Arkansas. The information and opinions expressed by the author in this presentation do not necessarily represent the official views of Delta Dental, School-Based Health Alliance of Arkansas, and Healthy Active Arkansas. So the last piece of this series is the budget. And the budget's going to be the one thing that in some ways is easy to do, but it's going to be one of the first things that will throw out your grant because of errors. I would say 99% of the grant applications out there will have a proposed budget to fill out and an itemized budget to fill out. And those are two different things. They are not the same thing. So you need to be aware of you're going to have more than one budget sheet for the same budget. Not completing the budget correctly will ensure your grant application will not get funded. I've seen too many budgets messed up on good applications because they didn't follow some simple rules. Grant funds for resources and activities must be reflected in the program action work plan. If the resources or activities are not reflected in the work plan, then the grant funds will probably not be approved. So it has to be in the work plan in order for it to be in the budget. Things to remember when doing your budget. Make sure everything in your budget links to your work plan. If it's not going to get funded. Use a calculator when checking your math. Math mistakes will disqualify grants more than anything else. Have someone else check your math. You can look at it 100 times and still miss the same mistake because you've seen it too much. Have a couple other people check your math. Do not go over budget, even by 1 cent. Stay under that ceiling of as much as you can request. Do not go over it. Round up when you can. Do not include anything under $1 in your budget because that just messes everything up. You can round up your figures, but make sure they work in your itemized budget. And I'm going to give you an example of an itemized budget. You can slightly pad your budget in some areas to cover some of the costs you can't get quotes on. Sometimes you can't get a quote on something. So you can slightly pad your budget, which helps when you round up some things. And it just makes it easier on you're adding your budget up. So it's okay to do it a little. Do not do it too much because it will raise red flags. Ask for all of the money that you can. Don't leave any on the table. If the grant's for $5,000, then you get as close as you can to $5,000, and it can be done. It may take some time and some effort, but it can be done, and you need to do it. Don't leave anything on the table if you can't help it. Now, itemized budgets should show the breakdown of your expenses so the readers can look and see exactly what you're spending the money on. If you list something in your itemized budget, say for $1,200 for a conference to XYZ, and you don't break it down, you're going to raise red flags with the reviewers because they're going to say, well, what are they spending that $1,200 on? An itemized budget is exactly that. It is itemized to show what you're spending it on and how much each cost is going to be. So it has to be itemized. FTE, you'll see FTE in some things. That simply means full-time employee or one person. And you'll see that in a minute too. Per diem. Per diem is used to cover your meal expenses during travel. Instead of saying breakfast or lunch, you just use per diem. And you cannot use per diem for meals unless overnight stay is required. You cannot request meal reimbursement for a meeting during the day at lunch unless there's overnight stay. But you also need to check with the requirements of your agency or your district to see how things are handled. Standard per diem rates can be found on a government website. I've included the address. You also, if you Google government per diem rates, it'll take you to that website. About 95% of the grant reviewers will check that website, the per diem website, to make sure that you are within the limits of your approved per diem rates. these per diem rates are listed for every state and will cover every city. Not every city may be identified. I think the last time I checked for Arkansas, the state had a pretty standard per diem rate except for Little Rock and Hot Springs. There were those had some higher per diem rates. So if you're writing a grant and you're traveling somewhere, you need to go get on that website and check those per diem rates and use those rates for your travel. Don't go over them. The only other thing you need to be cautious about is if you are able to go to an out-of-state conference, you absolutely need to check the per diem rates. And 9 times out of 10, especially if you're in Washington, D.C. or Atlanta sometimes, your conference rates for the hotel are going to be higher than the per diem rate. So if you've got any kind of documentation for the conference rate, you'll have to probably provide that within your grant application and make sure that you cover that in your budget. Because per diem rates and some conference rates usually do not match. So check that per diem site, and that's where you're going to get a lot of your figures. This site can be used to project your hotel costs and meals for your trips for out of state, well, in state too. But this will give you and the readers an understanding of how much you should be able to charge. Per diem rates also is broken down by breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you be careful if you're submitting something and you've got something that's costs more for breakfast than the per diem rate is. Sometimes that's not allowable. I'm trying to think of something else I was going to say. So check that per diem site for expenses. And it will help you in a lot of cases. Here's an example of how you need to break down your itemized budget. This would be reflective of a curriculum training, let's say. Breaking down your budget shows, okay, so the resources I need for that training is I need to purchase curriculum for my participants. I'm going to have up to 45 participants, and I've already looked on the website for the curriculum, and curriculum is about $250 per curriculum. So I need enough curriculum for 45 participants, and there's my figure at $11,000. And I also look to see what the shipping and taxes might be. So that's an estimate of $135. Make sure that you include that when you can. I'm also going to need a meeting space, training space. And where I want to have it, it's $1,000 a day. So for 2 days, it's $2,000. And I have to have a trainer, and they charge me $1,000 a day, and it's going to be 2 days, so it's $2,000. This is itemized budget, and the grant readers, reviewers will be able to look at this and say, okay, this is all going towards what they want to do with the training of their community and school people. So this is what constitutes an itemized budget. So this is an example of a projected budget, and this just is giving the reviewer, okay, for purchase services, they have $250 allocated for a national conference, and in-state and out-of-state travel is split up. So the national conference over $1,000, in-state travel is $98, and for the rest of the budget, they've got $600. So this is not the itemized budget. This is the projected budget, which is what the reviewers will look at. And this is the itemized budget. And this budget, see down here, the $2,020, this should match this information in the projected budget. So the $2,500, so what's it for? Well, there's a national conference in Washington, D.C., from 6/2 to 6/4, 2000 and whatever. The registration fee for one FTE, one person, is $250. That tells them that that's the conference that they want to go to, and those are the dates that they're going. So, and that gives them the information of the conference that they're going to. So that was covered in their work plan. breakdown of more the out-of-state travel, Washington, D.C., lodging for one full-time employee for 5 nights is $118. That's what the per diem rate said. Again, if you need to go and look and see what the conference rate is, you might have to go in and look at the conference rate. If it's, sometimes the conference rates for $200, you need to be able to put the 5 nights at $200 and then put conference rate somewhere, and then you'll also have to have documentation. Probably go in the website and print off the a sheet that says the conference rate is $200 a night. The per diem rate for one full-time person, 6 days, is $51. And it'll be broken down so that you've got your breakfast, lunch, and dinner covered. If you're at a conference and they provide you with breakfast and lunch, you cannot request that in your per diem. So you need to be cognizant of if the conference is providing breakfast, lunch, dinner, if they're providing any of those, you cannot ask for them on your per diem. Ground transportation, that's usually taxi, bus, train, whatever, at the location of your conference. If you have to get from the airport to the hotel or whatever, Uber, Lyft, that's the ground transportation. Parking, that's usually like if you have to go to the airport and leave your car for 6 days, it'll pay for your parking. Airfare, you can get on when you're making your travel authorization request. You can get on the airline and see what different flights cost, and a lot of times you'll have to give 2 or 3 examples, estimates, and then I would pad it just a little to make sure that by the time your travel request gets authorized, flights may have gone up. So pad it just a little, but not too much. And then airline baggage fee, when I did this, it was $25. I think most airline baggage fee now is like up to $30. So check on that for one person. So that's broken down travel justification for the hotel and the parking and everything. The readers are going to want to need to see that. They want to be able to see where that money's going. They don't want to see a cost of over $1,000 and no explanation. So you have to have this itemized budget, basically. In-state conference, this is for mileage. So you need to check with your agency or your school district to see what they'll pay for mileage. This is an example, one person times 200 miles, that's round trip, times 49 cents a mile. So that's where the $98 come from. General supplies, sometimes you need to be more specific, sometimes you don't. For my federal grant, I could put federal supplies for one full-time person for 12 months and put a figure. Some months I didn't spend $50, and other months I spent more than $50, depending on when I was doing trainings and stuff. But usually this will be an acceptable amount as long as it's not too much. Paper, pens, folders, printer, ink, any things that you need to do your daily work, prepare for workshops, whatever it is you need to do. So this is an example of an itemized budget that you will need to make sure that you do with your grant. And once you get the hang of it, it's not really that difficult, but you need to make sure that your projected budget and your itemized budget match, and they add up to the same amount. And that's what you need to do with your budgets, and it makes it a lot easier if you can do it that way.